Hi, my name is Dr. Trish Pierce from Advaita Natural Wellness. Welcome to my webinar, Unearthing the Root Cause of Autoimmunity and Creating the Conditions for Health. I'd like to start this webinar by saying that autoimmunity is one of my favorite things to teach about, especially because it's something that Dr. Alsop and myself both suffer from, as well as many friends and family members. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a naturopathic doctor, or an ND. I graduated from the National University of Health Sciences in Lombard, Illinois, very recently, actually, in August. My focus is on autoimmune conditions especially. Women's health, fat loss, and muscle building is a huge passion of mine. Digestive conditions and adrenal dysfunction. I'm always trying to learn. What I'm learning right now is a lot about inflammation. The Inflammation Mastery series by Dr. Alex Vasquez, I highly recommend to anyone who's seeking to learn a lot more about inflammation and autoimmunity, as well as the Seeking Health Education Institute and the Clinical Nutrigenomics by Dr. Ben Lynch. My interests, of course, as you can imagine, number one is helping people. I also love to bodybuild. I've been doing that since July 2012. I love to hike, read, garden. I love to learn in general, really. And I also care for my own personal zoo. Personal fact is, before I decided to become a naturopath, I actually spent my whole life wanting to be a veterinarian. So I fill that hole by having a large household of animals, including 2 dogs, 2 cats, a lizard, and many fish. And these are some of the associations I belong to. The AANP is the National Association for NDs, and the ILANP is our state organization. So let's talk first a little bit about what naturopathic medicine is before we get into the autoimmunity nitty-gritty, because I do get a lot of confusion on this topic. So let's just break down the word. Naturo, or nature, and pathic, disease, is basically saying we are addressing disease through the principles of nature. This is a holistic means, complementary medicine, integrative medicine. These are all things that you usually hear applied to this paradigm of healthcare. NDs are trained at one of only 8 accredited schools in the US and Canada. It is a 4-year post-baccalaureate program, so that is to say, yes, I have spent 8 years of my adult life in school. Currently, 17 states in the District of Columbia license and regulate naturopathic doctors, so we are not licensed nationwide, and unfortunately, we're not licensed yet in Illinois. However, if you live in Illinois and you've benefited from an ND, we'd always encourage you to write your congressperson, because we do have a bill currently in legislation, and we have pretty high hopes for it next year. What NDs are not, and I do hear quite a bit of this, sometimes people refer to me as their homeopathic doctor, and that's fine. You know, there is a lot of confusion on that. But we are not homeopaths, naturopaths, and we are different from what we call the undies, or the unlicensed naturopaths. Basically, these are people who, you know, are interested in holistic medicine but haven't necessarily been through the doctoral program. Some foundational principles of our medicine, these are very important to me. These were hammered into our heads during school. So these are some things that I always keep in mind when I'm with clients. Nature has a healing power. So this is to say, it is the belief of NDs that the innate and natural tendency is for us to be healthy. The body wants to be healthy. Just like an airplane wants to stay in the air, the body wants to be healthy. So if we create the conditions for health, health will naturally follow. We identify and remove the underlying causes of illness rather than seek to mask or eliminate symptoms. This is a tenet that's especially important in autoimmunity. That is the absolute crux of toning down and removing the symptoms of autoimmune disease, is finding out what's causing them in the first place, and we'll talk a lot about that later. Do no harm, of course, is something that all healthcare practitioners take an oath about. The doctor is a teacher. Docere is the Latin word for doctor. It means teacher in Latin. Our responsibility is to educate you, first and foremost, because there will come a time where, you know, you're walking out of our door and we may never see you again because you've gotten your own life together and you've figured out how to eat and how to exercise and do all these things because we've taught you how to do them, and you can go forth and, you know, live your life without our care. We treat every person like an individual. Physical, mental, emotional, genetic, spiritual, and social factors are unique in every person, and they need to be treated as such. We emphasize disease prevention, of course. We're one of the only healthcare models that actually does that. Most healthcare waits until a person is sick, medically ill before any interventions are taken. But we really focus our medicine entirely on prevention as much as possible. So this is a pyramid I like. This is what we use to basically base our approach to. So on the side, you can see that I have some of the different healthcare paradigms. I'll get to that in a minute, but first I kind of want to just go through this pyramid so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from when I talk about how NDs work. So at the base of the pyramid, of course, the most important part to your health, what we believe is essential, or the determinants of health, is things like diet, exercise, sleep, your mental, emotional health, how often you're drinking water, your hydration, how often you're being exposed to sunlight, loving relationships, genetic predispositions. All of these fall here on this base of this pyramid. So if we have a strong base in diet, exercise, all the things I just mentioned, health will naturally follow. The next one here is called stimulating the vis. Kind of a funny one. All that basically means is to stimulate the body's innate power of healing. It's kind of a woo-woo one, but it is to remind us that you encourage the body to heal, and it will. Support tissue and organ systems. So this is kind of broad. These are things that I think of like glutamine for gut health, right? So we're addressing the organ system as a whole. Restoring structural integrity. In Illinois, unfortunately, we can't really do much of this, but when you think of this one, you can kind of think of how DCs work, or chiropractors. MSK health, anything that has to do with stretching or yoga, or anything that has to do with your actual physical body. Natural symptom control. So this is something we use for, let's say you have pain, and we use curcumin, right? So instead of addressing a whole tissue or organ system, what we're kind of doing is we're giving you something for a symptom that you have, but is still natural. Drug-based symptom control, that's pretty self-explanatory. And high force interventions are typically things like immunosuppressive drugs like prednisone, surgeries, things that have their own side effects and tend to take somewhat of a toll on the body. So I have these little sidebars here, mainly because I just want to show where NDs are at on this spectrum. So where NDs are typically working is in these bottom 5 categories. In licensed states, NDs do prescribe drugs, but as rarely as possible, basically. We will, in an unlicensed state, of course, refer you to an MD if we think that drugs are warranted in your condition. So it's not that we're drug averse, it's just one of our, it's not our top choice for treatment. And you can see on the right-hand side, MDs and DOs, of course, tend to work at the pinnacle of the pyramid. All the way at the bottom, we have nutritionists who kind of mostly work with diet. DCs work with structural integrity. Homeopathic doctors, acupuncturists, they work mainly with the stimulating the vis, or encouraging the body's natural mechanisms of healing through very minimally invasive methods like acupuncture and homeopathy. I added this because I get this question a lot: is naturopathic medicine evidence-based? Well, maybe I don't get the question a lot. I guess I sometimes get the statement, well, naturopathic medicine isn't evidence-based. So I want to clarify this real quick. NDs are educated within the model of an evidence-based practice, or the use of interventions that have the backing of peer-reviewed scientific studies. So, you go on PubMed and you search for, let's just say, omega-3 fatty acids and their effect on Hashimoto's thyroiditis. You come up with a whole bunch of different studies. That is the basis of what I do when I'm coming up with my approach to any given case. If I want to use a certain intervention, I always see if there's studies on it, and then if there are or not, that's what kind of directs me on whether or not I want to use that particular thing. So of course, it is our preference to use lifestyle interventions, nutritional supplementation, botanical medicine. It is our preference to use the things that have been proven to be effective. However, the caveat here is that single intervention, double-blind, and placebo-controlled trials, now these are the gold standard in a conventional or allopathic medical model. It totally makes sense, right? Researchers who are doing these studies, they're seeking to quantify and qualify the efficacy of a single intervention. And what is that usually? Usually a drug, maybe a surgical procedure, but it's usually a one single intervention looking for one single outcome. So the gold standard in allopathic medicine, we can kind of say, is a poor standard by which to judge complementary and alternative naturopathic medicine. And why is that? Because holistic medicine, and you can see it in the name, by its very nature, assesses the picture of a person's health as a whole. Unique constitution, unique lifestyle, and personal history. We're not really looking to correct a single symptom. We're not really looking to come up with a single outcome. What we're looking to do is to use all these interventions in a synergistic manner. And when this synergistic manner is used, we have many different, it's like, dominoes falling. So you have a very complex case, and you do diet, you do lifestyle, you do a couple different herbal medications, you do a couple different nutrients. And, instead of seeing one symptom go away, we see a person's entire life change, so that's something that can't necessarily be mimicked by a single intervention trial. So conventional medicine follows a standard of care that basically dictates that disease X should be treated by drug Y. And in that model, that most certainly makes sense. But in our model, it just doesn't fit quite as well. So this is just a little cartoon mock-up of kind of what I was talking about. So here we have, in the conventional world, a one-size-fits-all kind of single intervention model. So an easy example I think of is Hashimoto's thyroiditis or autoimmune thyroiditis. So basically we have the immune system attacking the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland basically unable to do its job and failing to produce thyroid hormone. So in the conventional model, what we do is we prescribe thyroid hormone, right? The thyroid is kind of been beaten down by the immune system, it's not working as well anymore. So what do? Oh, well, we just replace the missing thyroid hormone. Here's your drug, right? In the naturopathic model, what we're trying to do is, instead of addressing the health of the thyroid, which of course we want to address that, but what we want to really address is we want to tame down the thing that's attacking the thyroid, right? The immune system. We want to get that under control, get that inflammation under control, so that hopefully the thyroid can start to rebuild itself, right? And produce thyroid hormone on its own. Now, this is not to say that this model is wrong and this model is right. They're just different, right? A lot of times they're combined. To me, that's ideal, is when both of these things are working together. They're truly complementary in the sense that both of these healthcare paradigms are working together and creating the best outcome for that particular person. So let's really get into it. Autoimmune disease, a multitude of conditions with one common cause. Some statistics. Autoimmune disease is definitely on the rise. So this is from the American Autoimmune Related Diseases Association, ARDA. Kind of looks like aardvark. I don't know why I just thought of that. But what they say is that 23.5 to 50 million Americans suffer from autoimmune disease, and that is a lot of people. The CDC estimates more on the lower end of 23.5. This organization was estimating higher, basically because they were including all of the conditions that science suspects is due to an autoimmune problem, whereas the CDC was kind of looking at the top 10 most common autoimmune conditions. So it could really range. It could be really high at 50 million. It could be at 23. 80 to 100, and likely more, conditions have been found to have autoimmunity as the root cause. And costs are $100 or more billion a year. And that is just stunning. So why is autoimmunity on the rise and what causes it, right? So like many other chronic conditions, this is how I think of autoimmune disease. It's caused by two predominant factors: genetic predisposition and lifestyle. When we add these two things together, we get the probability of developing autoimmunity. Genetic predisposition plays a substantial role in the development of autoimmune disease, and of course this is evidenced by the fact that autoimmunity often runs in families, right? But I am a firm believer that genetic predisposition is not necessarily the end-all be-all. I don't believe that if you have the predisposition, you're necessarily going to get the disease. What really comes into play is lifestyle. That this is kind of goes along with the nature versus nurture debate. On nature, you have genetic predisposition, and on nurture, you have lifestyle, right? So you really need to look at both pieces of the puzzle to get a sense of what's causing your autoimmunity. It's also speculated that epigenetics may play a role. So epigenetics is a relatively new field of study. If you think of your genetics as kind of like the blueprint to what you are, you can think of your epigenetics as how your genes get read or get expressed. So for example, you have a blueprint within you in your DNA of everything you could ever possibly be as a human being. There's code in your DNA for how to make a tail. And of course, we don't turn that on. We don't have tails at this point. But the code tends to still be there. And there's also genetic sequences in us that get turned on or off based on how we live our lives. That's called epigenetics. So you can see that how lifestyle even influences our genes directly when we're talking about that. So does having a genetic predisposition, sorry about that, does having a genetic predisposition to a condition guarantee you'll get it? I believe it does not. So let's take an example. To me, like I said, lifestyle factors arguably the biggest determinant whether or not you're going to get an autoimmune condition, assuming that you have the genetic predisposition. Poor habits and exposure to negative environmental influences can have a cumulative, and this is the key word here, have a cumulative effect and culminate in autoimmune disease. So if you look at my like really goofy and very badly drawn picture of it, I'm usually good at paint, but for some reason I couldn't figure out how to do a cup. I don't even know. So here we have, this is kind of the analogy I use for people when we talk about autoimmunity, because here's what I hear a lot in seeing chronic conditions. People feel like their symptoms kind of came at them out of nowhere. You know, sometimes it's a lifelong buildup and people recognize that. But a lot of times what I hear is, well, I'm in your office today because it seems like ever since 6 months ago, I have been feeling X, Y, and Z, right? All of a sudden you noticed that you just felt like crud one day. And you're thinking to yourself, how did this just come out of nowhere? I've been fine. Now out of nowhere, seemingly, I feel terrible. It's not that one single thing happened and then you started feeling terrible. It's called a cumulative effect, right? Or a total load, total body burden, sometimes we hear. So in this example, we have, let's just say it's a nice lady. She's had a history of smoking. She's had poor sleep quality. She hasn't exercised. She's eaten kind of a crummy diet for years. And she's at a point where if her body is this water glass, the water is kind of, you can see right there at the brim. It's just about to slosh over. It's still in the cup. She's still not noticing. She's still going along, doing her daily life. She's fine. But it's all just kind of waiting. It's just all waiting. One day, maybe something happens, something really stressful. Maybe she takes on a huge project at work. Maybe she loses her spouse. Maybe, who knows what? Maybe she starts eating donuts for breakfast every single morning. I don't know. It could be anything. It can cause that water in the glass to finally spill over, and now she's seeing symptoms. She's had the burden her whole life, or for a very long time. Now all of a sudden she's seeing symptoms and wondering, where the heck did this come from, when this has been a very cumulative thing. I hope that makes sense. So let's kind of switch gears and talk about some common autoimmune conditions. These are kind of the ones that we tend to see most often. I think as NDs, we see these quite frequently. There are others that certainly we could talk about, but I think these are worth talking about since they're seen so often. So Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, these are both thyroid. So in Hashimoto's, typically what we have is a hypothyroid picture. Basically, the thyroid's not able to produce enough hormone. And in Graves' disease, we have a hyperthyroid picture where the thyroid is producing way too much hormone. So these come with, you know, very different symptom pictures. They are both attacking the thyroid, but they are very, very different conditions. Multiple sclerosis, we have the immune system attacking the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord especially. Psoriasis, of course, we have skin. Rheumatoid arthritis, we have joints, especially sometimes it can be, the inflammation can be a little bit more systemic, but what we mainly are familiar with is in the joints. SLE or lupus, now this is one that's, this one's of the autoimmune diseases is one of the, or if not the worst one, mainly because it's the immune system not attacking For example, in Hashimoto's, we have the immune system attacking the thyroid. In SLE, the immune system can be going after pretty much any tissue in the body. So we see a lot of skin, we see musculoskeletal, we can see kidneys, we can see cardiovascular. So it can manifest itself in many different locations. In celiac disease, we have the small intestine. Inflammatory bowel disease, so these are two different diseases. We have ulcerative colitis, which is the small intestine, and we have Crohn's, which can be pretty much anywhere from the mouth to the anus. Now, Crohn's is unlike UC in that UC just attacks the large intestine. Crohn's can really be anywhere, but it tends to be in the lower part of the small intestine, and it can also be in the large intestine. In type 1 diabetes, we have the pancreas. The islets of Langerhans cells are what's being attacked, causing basically the body is unable to produce insulin. So these people have to be on insulin lifelong. Scleroderma, skin, and also other systems. So you might be wondering, how can such a diverse array of seemingly unrelated conditions, totally different organ systems, how can these all be related? Because every autoimmune condition, regardless of organ system, has an inflammatory autoimmune process as the underlying cause. So I like to say, saying Hashimoto's is a thyroid disease is a misnomer, right? Yes, in the conventional model, if you're treating Hashimoto's disease, you're treating the thyroid gland because you're essentially replacing thyroid hormone. Now, I think that's a little unfair to the thyroid because, imagine that you're at work. You come into work one day and you notice that your entire office has been just like ransacked and like all your stuff has been stolen and your things are broken. And you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck do? I can't work. And your boss comes in and says, listen, you're in trouble because you're not working. This is your problem. You're not doing your work and you're fired. I'm being a little ridiculous, but calling Hashimoto's a thyroid disease is a lot like that, right? Because you're blaming the thyroid for something that's really not the thyroid's fault. It's the immune system. So what we have to address is the immune system in order to let the thyroid do its job. This is a little flowchart to help you better understand kind of how you get from this genetic predisposition and lifestyle factors to your symptoms, right? So here we have these two guys getting things started as always. Lifestyle, if this is something like a poor diet, lack of exercise, lack of sleep, we can get into something called chronic inflammation. And when I say inflammation, all I want you to think of is a bunch of immune cells coming to a certain spot to be mad and eat things. So you can think of this as like a shark feeding frenzy, right? So like a drop of blood gets in the ocean or whatever, and all of a sudden there's like a million sharks in the area, all trying to figure things out and eat stuff. And that's kind of how your immune system works, bizarrely. One immune cell gets to the foreign invader or tissue damage, whatever it is that's upsetting it, and calls all the rest of the immune cells to come over to. Like, come on, guys, like we got to do something about this. That's inflammation. Now, when you cut your finger, right, you get inflammation at that site. That's called acute inflammation. And that usually goes away within 1 or 2 days, and that's fine, normal response. But it's when inflammation has become a chronic, ongoing thing that it becomes a problem. And as we can see here, that's when it starts to lead to these autoimmune processes. Then, once these autoimmune processes have been going for a while, the immune system is basically attacking cell tissue, and that leads to secondary organ dysfunction. So if it's attacking the thyroid, it's leading to thyroid dysfunction. Now we're talking about symptoms. Once that organ dysfunction has gotten to a point where you're noticing it and you're having symptoms, this is when you're probably seeking care. So in order to understand autoimmunity, we first need to kind of get a handle on what the normal job of the immune system is. So in normal function, the immune system identifies, destroys, and remembers foreign invaders in the body like bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, anything that gets in your body that your body doesn't like, that's a foreign invader. Immature immune cells, or what we call naive T cells, are trained by the body. So basically they're produced in your bone marrow, and then they go to various places, various organs in your body to train, kind of like a police academy, I guess you'd say. And what they're trained to do is to recognize foreign invaders, but ignore your self cells. So think of the police academy on their shooting ranges, right? you're on the shooting range and there's like these cardboard cutouts coming up, and some of them look like bad guys and you're supposed to shoot them, and some of them look like innocent civilians and you're supposed to leave them alone. That's basically exactly what your immune system goes through. So any immune cells that mistakenly recognize self are usually eliminated. So in autoimmunity, what happens is these predisposing factors of genetics and lifestyle cause the immune system to become hypervigilant and confused. Therefore, it allows them to mistakenly recognize these self cells as foreign and attack them. This process is called loss of self-tolerance. And self-tolerance is the process by which these cells get trained. When we talk about loss of self-tolerance, we kind of have an immune system that has gone rogue and is just attacking you. So how does this happen? How do immune cells get this way? What I want you to remember is that immune cells are a product of the environment that they live in, okay? And honestly, you could say this of many things. You could say this of people. But I'm a weirdo, and I came up with this analogy, which is Tamagotchi. I wonder if you're my age, late 20s, you remember these were like virtual pets, like everybody had them in middle school. But basically the premise is that you started off with this little like virtual blob, right? It was just like a little blob guy. And depending on the care you gave him, if you gave him healthy food and you played with him and he slept well, he grew up to be, or evolved into, a good character, so to speak. It was like a cute character. But if you neglected him, didn't give him good food, you gave him crummy food, he evolved into a bad character, and he's like sulking and mean. And really, this is bizarrely kind of exactly how your immune system works. So in an anti-inflammatory or healthy environment, immune cells tend to evolve into cells that keep the peace, they fight infection, and they don't cause problems. They don't attack self. However, immature cells raised in an inflammatory environment evolve into aggressive, hypervigilant cells that contribute to autoimmunity. So when I'm talking about inflammatory environment, you might be wondering, what the heck does that mean? When I talk about inflammatory environment, what I'm really talking about are cytokines. So cytokines are chemical messengers used by the immune system to communicate. So for the most part, cytokines fall into one of two categories. They can be inflammatory or they can be anti-inflammatory. And like I said before, just think of inflammation and inflammatory cytokines as just like a call to arms for your immune cells. So every time there's inflammation, immune cells come to the site, they release more cytokines that say, hey, we need more inflammation here. And it kind of becomes kind of a vicious circle, if you will. So some nitty gritty stuff. You don't have to like memorize what these are. That's my job. But pro-inflammatory cytokines, IL-1, 6, 8, 12, TNF-alpha, there are many, many more of these. What I want you to remember really is IL-10 is one of your most important anti-inflammatory cytokines. So IL-10 is what the good anti-inflammatory, good character cells are secreting to calm things down. TNF-beta is typically anti-inflammatory. It can kind of go both ways, so I really want you to remember IL-10. So here is my Tamagotchi-esque diagram for you. Here we have an immature immune cell, or like I said, a naive T cell. And basically all that's happening here is in a pro-inflammatory environment, we have this cute little innocent cell becoming this guy, a Th17 attack cell. His whole job is to be mean and create more inflammation. In an anti-inflammatory environment, we have this guy, this like innocent looking, like he's just trying to keep the peace. He's like the mediator of your immune system. He's called a T regulatory cell. So what he's able to do is secrete that cytokine, IL-10, the calming cytokine, and he kind of gets this guy to like chill out, right? He tells him to stop attacking, he gets the whole inflammatory process to kind of be arrested. So the place where the cellular environment exerts the most influence over whether a baby immune cell will become a Th17 or a T regulatory cell is the gut. Isn't that amazing? It's the gut, of course, because 70% of your immune system can be found in the gut, in patches called Peyer's patches. They're also called GALT. Sometimes you'll hear that one as well. But within these patches, baby immune cells get signals from cytokines in the area telling them to evolve into a Th17 or T regulatory cell. I think it's pretty cool. So why is this important? Like, why do you even need to know this? The reason it's important is knowing that immune cells can have an inflammatory or anti-inflammatory effect based on their environment is so, so important, because what it does is it gives us a means to influence this process. So we're able to intervene here. It's not something that is just like, oh, well, woe is me. This is just going to keep happening. There's nothing I can do about it. No, this for sure can be changed, and we can change it through diet, supplementation, and lifestyle changes. It's amazing. We can influence the destiny of immune cells, and we can help break this kind of vicious cycle of autoimmunity. So here it is, the vicious cycle of autoimmunity. So here we have on the left-hand side genetics and lifestyle, like I've said about a bazillion times now, getting the whole party started, causing immune cells to respond to inflammatory cytokines, causing those immune cells to become Th17 cells, or attack cells. These immune cells making more inflammatory cytokines, calling more Th17 cells to the site, and eventually getting a hypervigilant, confused immune system that is attacking self-tissue. And anytime you get tissue damage, what do you get? More inflammation. So I want to talk a little bit about breaking this vicious cycle, right? Like, is there something we can do? Can we get in there and break it? And yes, for sure. So what I've done is kind of just crossed out and made everything a little different here. Immune cells can respond to anti-inflammatory cytokines. These immune cells can then be influenced to become T-regulatory calm cells. These calm cells can secrete less inflammatory cytokines, more anti-inflammatory cytokines, and eventually can cause the body to stop attacking self-tissue. And that is a huge, huge thing. So rather than seeking to mask or reduce the symptoms associated with autoimmunity, what naturopathic medicine does is we seek to improve the cellular environment and therefore decrease inflammation. So if immune cells are able to calm down and regain tolerance for self-cells, the process of autoimmunity can slow a lot. At Advaita, we go about this in a kind of characteristic certain way, and we kind of focus on these 4 pinnacle areas: removing inflammatory triggers from the lifestyle, decreasing inflammation through diet and immunomodulation, improving intestinal integrity, and aiding in the repair of the tissue or organ system that's been under attack. So first, let's talk about removing inflammatory triggers of autoimmunity. Now, this is something that you may yourself be able to determine, like, oh, maybe that's a trigger for me, and maybe you can remove it. What NDs tend to do is, in our first office visit, we sit you down, we take about 60 to 90 minutes, and we talk about your entire life, like from the time you were born to the time you're sitting in my office chair. We'll kind of go through everything that has ever had an influence on your health. And my job is to find what is triggering your autoimmunity, like what could possibly be causing your immune system to do what it's doing. So some of the things I find very frequently, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some of the things I find frequently: food allergies and intolerances. These are huge, huge, huge. I can't even say. Gluten, dairy, soy, legumes, all of these things are inflammatory and can create food allergies. Nutritional deficiencies, chronic infections, intestinal dysbiosis, these two kind of go together. Stress, chronic, long-term, all the time, you hate your job type of stress. Sleep deprivation and poor sleep quality, exposure to toxic chemicals, heavy metals, xenobiotics, all that kind of horrible environmental crud that we have in our environment nowadays. Endocrine imbalances. So if you have, let's say, adrenal dysfunction, or some type of thyroid hypofunction, or female hormone imbalance, that's what we're talking about when we say endocrine imbalances. Lack of exercise and outdoor activities. And this sounds a little out there and weird, but unaddressed mental, emotional pain and trauma, these can be huge. And if you think that your mental, emotional state does not affect your immune system, it absolutely does. It has a huge effect on your immune system. So these are all the types of things that we look for to try to remove or at least mitigate in cases of autoimmunity. So immunomodulation, this is the process, like we've said repeatedly, this is just the process of encouraging baby immune cells to become T-regulatory cells instead of Th17 cells. That is just to say, let's create an anti-inflammatory environment. So you might be wondering, can diet and lifestyle and supplements and all this, can this really be effective at immunomodulation? It seems so simplistic, right? So I did a little research for you. And these are just, well, this is fun to do. These are just a few of the studies that, I mean, I came across, this probably took me 10 to 15 minutes, but there are just an unbelievable amount of studies showing that these seemingly very simplistic interventions are actually quite effective. Let's talk about the pro-inflammatory standard American diet. Now, I'm not saying that everybody eats like this. Believe I know plenty of like vegan, like CrossFit, like superhuman Americans for sure. But for the most part, Americans eat a diet that looks kind of like this. We have grains like bread, pasta, donuts, cereal, granola bars, delicious grains. Sugars, pastries, candy bars, pop, fruit juice. Yes, fruit juice. Yes, fruit juice is mainly just a sugar. It's not necessarily a health food. Conventionally produced meat. So just basically what I'm saying is cows and chickens raised on a conventional farm that are fed grain, fried foods, dairy, basically milk, cheese, butter. Most Americans eat a diet very low in vegetables, especially the non-starchy fibrous type of veggie. So like think of like a heaping salad of like spinach and kale, and it sounds gross to a lot of us. Believe me, you develop a taste for it. But these are very important things to be eating that our diets are just completely, there's a complete lack of them. Non-white fruits like berries, organically produced lean meat. So these are animals that are raised on big open farms. They're not in feedlots. They're eating grass the whole time, kind of living out their normal, natural lifestyle before they become what we eat. And as well as wild-caught or omega-3 rich fish. And beneficial fats. Omega-3, MCT oils come to mind. When I say omega-3 fat, what I'm talking about is the type of fat that's considered anti-inflammatory, okay? So there's omega-3, these are the big ones really, omega-3 and omega-6. So in a standard American diet, what you have a huge proportion of is omega-6 fats. These are inflammatory fats. They create inflammatory processes in the body. In the standard American diet, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is somewhere in the ballpark of like 30 to 1. It may even be higher now. That was just the last figure I read. And that's just ridiculous because what's supposed to be in nature is about a 5 to 1. Sometimes you'll read to 1 to 1 if that's too much. But a 5 to 1 is typically pretty healthy. So omega-3s are something you really, really want in your diet. So why is it bad to be sad, right? What you have to do is you have to think of the food you eat as a set of materials you are giving your body to work with. So if you give your body like nice, like beautiful quality materials, like beautiful oak wood, your body is going to make something beautiful out, or very useful at least, out of what you give it. If you give your body like, I don't know, like what I have in my office here, like IKEA materials, you're going to get something that in the long run may not be as effective or break down. So what I like to call these things is a net positive or a net negative effect, to kind of give you a sense of, the full thing that the food you're eating has influence. So let me use a McDonald's cheeseburger as an example, because your body doesn't know that what you're giving it is healthy or unhealthy. Your body just takes whatever you give it and makes whatever it can out of it, right? So if you eat a McDonald's cheeseburger, your body says, oh, great, perfect. Here we have protein. I can build muscle out of that. I can build neurotransmitters and, a whole bunch of different things to do a whole bunch of things, important processes in the body. I can use these buns to make sugar, to have energy. There's usually some degree of B vitamins or, some degree of iron in the meat. So your body, of course, even if it's a McDonald's cheeseburger, your body's going to use these tools to make what you need. However, McDonald's cheeseburger, on the other end of the spectrum, it is a meat that's raised conventionally, so it's loaded with omega-6 inflammatory fats. It's a refined, or at least the bun is a refined carb, so that's going to have an inflammatory effect. And then we have the contribution of all the different preservatives and chemicals they put in a McDonald's cheeseburger. So on the other end of eating McDonald's cheeseburger, while you got some benefit out of it, it has a net negative effect on the body. And an even better example of a net negative effect, or even something I would call an anti-nutrient, is alcohol. You drink alcohol, you get no benefit. Yes, you get a buzz. Your body gets no benefit, and in fact is harmed by it. And you of course recover from drinking, hopefully. But what you're giving your body is you're giving it something with empty calories, as they say, so that no nutrients. Your body has no way of making anything good out of the alcohol. And now your body has to use processes, it has to tie up machinery to get rid of the alcohol that could otherwise be used for something more beneficial. So when your diet exerts an overall net negative effect on your body, that's a situation where disease can develop. So here are some of the things on the standard American diet, kind of broken down by category of why they're bad. And grains are just, it's one of those things where we see a lot of food sensitivities. I'm not saying all grains are bad. I absolutely don't think that all grains are bad. I try to eat paleo, but I do eat rice occasionally. I don't think it's, I don't think it's going to kill anyone to not be completely grain-free. But grains do tend to have an inflammatory effect on the body. Refined grains especially tend to destabilize the blood sugar. They affect cortisol. So they tend to have a net negative effect, especially in a situation where that is predominantly what you're eating in your diet. And the same thing with sugar. Refined sugar affects the adrenal glands, it affects blood sugar, cortisol, insulin. Conventionally produced meats and fried foods, what we just discussed, very high proportion of omega-6 fatty acids, very low, if non-existent portion of omega-3s. And dairy, what we see a lot with dairy is cross-reactivity and, like I said, food sensitivity. So, this is a situation if you're sensitive to gluten, right? Your immune system sees gluten, doesn't like gluten, and attacks it. Dairy is one of these things that looks enough like gluten to maybe cause its own reaction. So we many times see a gluten and dairy sensitivity kind of go hand in hand. Like in me, for example. Yes, I live my life without gluten or dairy. So it all boils down to this. The standard American diet contributes to intestinal permeability and inflammation. It causes systemic inflammation. It is lacking in essential vitamins and minerals. It destabilizes blood sugar. It's frequently just loaded with chemicals, and it influences these naive and immature T cells to become pro-inflammatory Th17 cells and contributes to autoimmunity. So let's talk about eating to tame the flame, as one of my professors would have said. Basically what we're talking about here is the anti-inflammatory diet. Now for autoimmunity, I have modified this somewhat. Usually I encourage basically a loosely paleo-style diet. I believe in autoimmunity we need to be hitting it a little harder than that. This is an adaptation of a woman named Terry Walls, her Terry Walls protocol. This is an MD. She had progressive multiple sclerosis. She was very ill. She was getting to a point where she couldn't even walk anymore. She basically reversed the process with a version of this diet. Now her diet was slightly more intense than this one, but this right here is the premise behind her diet. So if you're autoimmune, this is something that you could consider implementing. You could go to her website, you could watch some of her videos and see what her reasoning is behind it. But what we're basically doing is, yes, we are removing foods from the diet. We're eliminating, for the most part, gluten and dairy as the most inflammatory. We're reducing grains and legumes. So paleo, you typically completely remove grains and legumes. With this diet, we're reducing them, right? 2 to 3 servings a week. Ideally, we're eliminating them, but if you're not there yet, that's okay. What this diet focuses on more than anything else is adding things. And that's the downfall of a lot of diets I see, that focus on carbs. They typically focus, my point is that they typically focus on taking stuff out, right? In this diet, yes, we're taking stuff out, but we're also adding, look at this number here, 9 cups of veggies a day. The way Terry Wall says it, she says, picture a dinner plate heaped high. So 3 dinner plates heaped high of the following. 3 cups leafy green veggies, so we're talking kale, spinach, collard, romaine kind of, but nothing like an iceberg lettuce, for example. Something that's a deep dark green. 3 cups of sulfur-rich veggies, so these are things like onions, mushrooms, garlic, the stuff you put in soups and stuff to make it really tasty. She wants you eating a lot of those. 3 cups of brightly colored fruits and veggies. So what comes to mind for me almost immediately on the fruit end is berries. And I also think of things like beets. Pretty much anything that when you cut into it, it's not white on the inside. So when you cut into an apple, it's white, right? So when you see that white, what you're kind of getting is you're getting some nutrients, but you're getting a whole lot of sugar. with things that are brightly colored, you're getting substances called flavonoids, right? And you're getting a lot of different vitamins and minerals that are essential for you. So what she also wants you to do is eat frequent small meals with protein and fat to stabilize blood sugar throughout the day. So this is a situation where people will think they're eating small frequent meals, and I'll be like, okay, well, what are you eating between breakfast and lunch and dinner? And they'll say, oh, I eat a piece of fruit. And that's fine. I think that fruit is one of those things that people go to as like a health food. But fruit essentially, what it gets broken down to in your body, it gets broken down to sugar. So what you want to do is instead of just having your fruit, and you're welcome to have the fruit, but you should also add a protein or a fat. So if you're eating an apple, I like to suggest, okay, well, add some almond butter to the apple. So always think of your snacks and your meals as having a portion of carbohydrates, ideally complex, and a significant portion of protein and fat to stabilize your blood sugar. You want to completely eliminate alcohol, pop, and tobacco, and drink mostly water. You can have the occasional like small glass of orange juice, but again, you just remember it's mainly sugar. Besides water, I love to tell people to drink green tea. It's very, very good in autoimmunity. Black tea is okay as long as you're not like pounding it because it does have caffeine. I do want to make a caveat for those with digestive issues because um, I am a long, long time sufferer of IBS, and so I know that if what you have is autoimmune Crohn's, autoimmune ulcerative colitis, you would look at a diet like this and be like, lady, you have to be kidding. There's no way. There's no way I could eat this. I'd be in so much pain. Totally understandable. So this is not necessarily a diet for someone to just jump into if you already have digestive complaints. Usually she encourages people to eat these things raw, but you don't have to. This is a situation where you start where you can. If you can only start with 3 cups a day, that's fine. If you have to cook them to oblivion, which is what I had to do to work my way up, that's fine too. But there's definitely some small changes that can be made so this diet can be more friendly towards somebody with digestive issues. Exercise, huge, huge for influencing the immune system to move into an anti-inflammatory state. I cannot recommend these 3 exercises enough. These are kind of my own personal belief. Of course, there are studies behind them, but what I strongly feel is our natural state is to do light or moderate cardio outdoors. I think that that's evolutionarily, that's what we kind of were designed to do. I don't think evolutionarily we were ever meant to be like walking on a treadmill in the middle of the busy export and like watching football on our tiny TV. And that, it's fine in a pinch if it's like sleeting outside in -30. But if you can get outside and walk your dog or go for a run or a hike or go swimming, all of these things are super beneficial for your circadian rhythm, for your cardiovascular health, and of course for toning down autoimmunity, like I said. Weight bearing and weightlifting exercises. If you're someone that has never lifted weights in your life, that's okay. I highly suggest bodybuilding.com. That might sound a little off-putting because of the name, but they have awesome, awesome resources for beginners. I also highly recommend the book, The New Rules of Weightlifting. There's one that's The New Rules of Weightlifting for Women, specifically for women. And it really walks you through some very simple exercises that really you only need to do 2 or 3 times a week. And it only takes you about 30 minutes. And the last one is yoga. Oh my God, yoga. There are so many studies on yoga for fatigue, for pain, anything you can think of. There's probably a study out there associating yoga as beneficial for it. Check out your local gym schedule. Typically, the bigger gyms, Export LA, Lifetime, they all have at least 1 or 2 yoga classes a week. And if not, you can always find a yoga studio in the area, go a couple times a week, or just watch a YouTube video. That works too. As long as you're getting it in, it doesn't matter how you're doing it. So these 3 exercises I feel can be fun. They can be minimally taxing and can be something that you could reasonably sustain. So supplementation for immunomodulation, basically these are the 3 supplements that I would say are crucial to immunomodulation. These are the ones that have the best studies for sure. I've done the most reading on these. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish, preferably the EPA and DHA. If you're a vegetarian, you can get it from ALA or from flax oil. 1.5 to 3 grams daily. Now, if you're on blood thinning medication or something like that, you always want to check with your doctor, make sure that a higher dose of fish oil is going to be safe for you. But I've had people that were on, and I'm trying to remember exactly. I had one lady who had ankylosing spondylitis and peripheral neuropathy that was autoimmune in origin. She actually got up, she was taking 5 to 6 grams of fish oil a day without a problem because that is what she needed. Her immune system was so hyped up that that's what it took to kind of bring it down. So basically my point is it's a very variable dose. But 1.5 to 3 grams tends to be very safe. Vitamin D, if you've been reading the rest or watching the rest of my autoimmune disease series, you'll know that I talk a lot about the vitamin D receptor or VDR, the polymorphism. So when I say polymorphism, all I'm talking about is a small genetic defect, right? So instead of having a normal vitamin D receptor on your cell, which you could just basically picture as like a vitamin D doggy door, basically, instead of it being wide open and letting vitamin D just kind of flow in freely, what we have is you can picture a door that's closed or maybe partially shut. So for these people, it's unfortunate that they have this polymorphism because typically the people that have these vitamin D polymorphisms are also autoimmune. So if you're autoimmune, you already need more vitamin D as it is, and now you have this polymorphism that's preventing you from getting all the vitamin D that you need. So typically these people need a much higher dose of vitamin D than is recommended by the RDA. So the RDA says 400 to 600 IUs of vitamin D daily. Many times it just says you don't even need to supplement with that. You can just go sit in the sun. But I do believe that higher or physiological doses of vitamin D are necessary for autoimmunity. You can read all about this. But 2,000 to 5,000 IUs are a fairly safe dose to give daily. And you can even honestly go higher, but I think that's a good place to start. The best thing to do is to take your vitamin D with your omega-3 fatty acid because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. If you take it with a fat, it'll get absorbed better. And of course, a quality multi. I think that's something that everybody should probably be taking. A quick word about supplement quality. You might be familiar with this news article. New York Attorney General targets supplements at major retailers. Basically what they found is, you pick up a Walmart brand of, let's say St. John's Wort, I think was one of them, and they analyzed it. And what they found was there was no substance that was claimed to be in the supplements still there. So basically what I'm saying is supplements that are bought over the counter in health food stores sometimes, but especially in like big chains, they're very poorly regulated. They're subject to very little quality control. The ones that you can get online from like Amazon, poor quality control, plus you really don't know where they came from. Companies who make pharmaceutical grade quality supplements only sell to healthcare practitioners for the most part. You want to know where you should purchase your supplements? The best place to do it is from the practitioner that recommended them to you. Many times, practitioners will have this stuff in their offices. At Advaita, we actually have a website that has all of our brands right there. That way we can guarantee that what you're getting is good and it's worth your money. So the third step in this process, improve intestinal integrity. And why is this important? Why is healing the gut important? Basically, when you have a situation where you've had chronic inflammation for a very long time, what can happen is the cells lining your intestine or your gut can become too spread apart. They're supposed to be in something called a tight junction, or they're supposed to be connected very tightly to each other to prevent anything from basically getting from your gut into your blood. Of course, that's bad. We don't want that. When something like leaky gut, that's the colloquial term for intestinal permeability, when something like that happens, we have gaps, like if you're missing a tooth, think of kind of like that. If you have a big gap where things can get through, your immune system tends to encounter proteins that it wouldn't normally encounter. So, partially digested, say gluten, partially digested proteins of dairy. These are the things that your immune system is going up to. It's finding them in the blood because they got through your leaky gut. And your immune system sees these things and is like, yeah, you're a foreign invader and I'm going to attack you now. So that is part of the process that leads to this hypervigilant immune state. So in naturopathic medicine, we tend to refer to healing the gut or as we heard a lot in school, treating the hole in the middle. We do this through the 4 Rs. So this is remove, replace, repair, and reinoculate. So remove means if there's any kind of intestinal infection, dysbiosis, if there's a biofilm, we want to get that out of there. We can often do this through botanical medicine and diet. We want to replace any missing or low digestive enzymes or hydrochloric acid. We want to repair the cellular tight junctions in the gut. We can do this through botanical medicine. We also do this extensively through glutamine supplementation. And we reinoculate. So we give you probiotics. We give you the things that your beneficial bacteria like to eat to basically establish a good, healthy micro ecosystem of good bacteria in the gut. And lastly, we want to tonify the organ system that has been under attack. So when this immune attack has abated somewhat, and your poor little organ is kind of getting a break, that organ's natural state and what it wants to do naturally is kind of wants to revert to normal, wants to repair itself. So if you think of like psoriasis, if we take down the immune response in psoriasis, we can get the skin to eventually repair. So our goal is to kind of speed this process along. Our goal is to kind of give the body the tools it needs to make this happen faster than it would normally. So we think of an anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense diet like we've discussed. We think of very good quality sleep, very targeted supplementation, and botanical medicine. And every organ system does have its own unique protocol. In future webinars, I can be more specific on the unique protocol for each system, but for now, suffice it to say that even just calming the immune system down is doing a lot. A fifth one that I didn't mention before, but I think is worth noting, naturopathic genetic analysis. This is something that we offer exclusively at Veta. And this is something that is really beneficial for people that feel like they're missing a piece of the puzzle, right? So we've done all of these things. We've changed your diet, we've changed sleep, you're exercising, you're taking your supplements, you're doing everything you're supposed to, but you're still not 100%. What we do is we take the data from a 23andMe test that you're able to order, and you basically spit in a little tube and send it off, and they send you back some data on your genes. They analyze your entire sequence of genes, and they send us back some data that shows whether or not you have these things called SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms. And these can give us clues about your overall gene function. And why does that matter? Because if we look at your profile and we see something like, say, the vitamin D receptor defect, we know that now what we can do is supplement you with very high levels of vitamin D. And there's other polymorphisms just the same way. You might be familiar with MTHFR. This is the methylfolate gene. And these are just ways for us to be more specific and more targeted in our supplementation. So it might be kind of hard for you to read this. I'll read them to you, but just some quick facts. These are just things that I hear a lot, so I just want to clarify. Is it possible to cure autoimmunity with holistic or naturopathic means? And I have to say, once autoimmunity has been turned on, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to turn off, completely at least. However, significant improvements can and often are made through lifestyle interventions. Can I stop seeing my regular doctor, rheumatologist, specialist while I'm making these changes? No. It is essential that you maintain a good relationship with your regular MD. Lifestyle changes and supplementation are never intended to be a replacement for medical advice. I like to say that NDs, rather than being a replacement for conventional medicine, are an addition, right? So we never seek to, be the be-all, end-all. We believe that there are multiple avenues towards your health, and we are one of them. And if I make these changes, can I stop taking my medication? And that's impossible for us to say. Ideally, you would feel so much better that the need for medication would be mitigated. However, this is a question that only you and your MD and DO can make a decision about. And this is one of my favorites. I, my family, or my friends, or my doctor are skeptical about this approach. They say that there is no evidence that naturopathic medicine is an effective approach to autoimmunity. I agree. There is no clinical trial showing that naturopathic, or conventional medicine for that matter, are effective approaches to autoimmunity. That's just not how studies work. Rather, the best evidence shows that certain interventions, like drugs, as well as diet, lifestyle changes, botanicals, vitamins, etc., are effective approaches to autoimmunity. So if your doctor is skeptical about a recommendation that we make, we are always more than happy to provide evidence that it's effective. And do you have any book recommendations for what you've discussed? Absolutely. The latest blog post, I actually just posted it today, has links to my favorite books on autoimmunity on Amazon.com. So what's next? Ask yourself these questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sick and tired do you feel? If you rate yourself as less than a 6, I would say go back through this, make some of the changes I mentioned, order one of the books that I've recommended, see if your symptoms improve. If you rate yourself as a 7 to 10 out of 10, if you are really, really sick and you don't know what to do, please make an appointment. And ask yourself, do you have the willpower, do you have the motivation to make a change and take control of your health? And if your answer is yes, that's fantastic. That's fantastic because we can work together and we can make this happen. But if your answer is no, or you're unsure, that's okay too. You know, sometimes we need a coach. Sometimes we need somebody to encourage us to do certain things kind of in a step-by-step manner. And ask yourself, if you have somebody guiding you, are you willing to make serious lifestyle changes? Are you willing to make them to take control of your own health? And if the answer is yes, then please schedule your first 2 appointments and let me help you take accountability for your health. The first 2 consultations, and we do instead of a 1 first office visit, we split them into 2. We have the initial interview, that's the first one. It's in office or online at your convenience. It's 60 to 90 minutes in duration. And basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be coming ready to talk. I want you to tell me all about your health history. I want you to tell me everything there is to know about you. And please bring any past lab work or medical history. The second appointment is usually about 2 or 3 days later, in office or online, again, at your convenience. It's usually about 60 minutes, and I want you to come ready to learn. So by the time you leave here, I want you to have a complete understanding of your condition. I want you to understand what may have caused it and what our direction is for doing something about it. We'll discuss your health history, your lab work, and the plan that I have developed for you as well. The cost of my first 2 consults, typically what I charge is $200 per appointment. For the first 2 visits, I like to just kind of roll them together into a single charge of $250. However, for anyone signing up after watching this webinar, I would like to offer the first 2 consults for $200. That's a $400 value. I ask this to be paid upon scheduling, and if I feel after the first 2 appointments that I am unable to help you, I will refund the cost of the first 2 appointments, and I will make you a referral, and I will do whatever is necessary for you to get help elsewhere. If you sign up for a program package, I will take that $200 and I will apply it to the cost of your package. What I'm trying to do is make the first 2 appointments essentially free if you sign up. A quick word about payment. Naturopathic doctors in the state of Illinois are unrecognized by insurance. Therefore, I cannot take any insurance. I manage and support people, not conditions. Therefore, in order to help you overcome your illness, I require 2 things of you. Your best effort, accountability, and dedication to your individualized treatment plan, and time. We absolutely, as NDs, need time. So this takes about 9 to 15 total visits, typically about 60 minutes long. And the answer to this question, do you charge visit to visit? I don't. And the reason is because, like I said, this takes a lot of time and effort. This takes a lot of research on my part, and it takes a lot of effort on yours. And it takes a lot of communication between the 2 of us. So if I went visit by visit and you didn't do a program, I would be selling you short. Programs are typically 6 to 18 weeks long, and they range in price from about $1,200 to about $2,300, usually depending on the duration of the program and the complexity of your case. And I want you to ask yourself, what's your health worth to you? You know, as a society, we are not accustomed to paying for healthcare out of pocket. You know, we're used to having our insurance pick it up, at least to a certain degree, right? But, you know, given that I cannot accept insurance in the state, I am a cash practice, so I want to create value for your $1,500 to $2,000. So let's think of what this might be. That's a decent insurance plan's deductible. It's a vacation. It's an out-of-pocket cost for laparoscopy. I know that because we went through that a couple years ago. It's what I spend at the emergency vet at my cat. You know, we go to the veterinarian, and for our animals' health, we literally spend whatever it takes, right? Right? Wouldn't you spend more money on your animal's health than yours? Isn't that bizarre? Totally true for me. But I think our health is really worth it too. And this one I kind of just put in here for kicks because I thought it was funny. 1 Humira kit without insurance, $2,179.50. How do you schedule an appointment? You can call or text 847-744-8484. My lovely receptionist Claire will be happy to help you schedule your first consult. You can visit our website and go to contact and schedule an appointment online. We do have a physical office location. It's 1821 Walden Office Square in Schaumburg. It's just off I-90. Or if you're too far away to come to the office, that's no problem either. You can schedule an online appointment to see us from the comfort of your own home. You could be sitting at your kitchen table or on your couch, whatever. If you have a smartphone or if you have a camera on your computer, you can see us no matter where you are. Once your appointment is scheduled, you'll receive a new client welcome packet via email, usually within 24 hours, and instructions for your invoice and making an account with our online portal, Fruit Street. I would love to help you get your life back. If you have any questions, you can please always email me. You can contact me from the website directly, or you can call that number. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you.